Babylon. 3,000 years ago, priests climbed ziggurats at night and stared at the sky, not out of wonder, out of necessity. They believed the stars were a message, a direct line from the gods to the living. And they built an entire science around reading it. We call it astrology now. We use it for horoscopes and Instagram captions, but the Babylonians used it to run empires. They tracked planetary movements with terrifying precision. They predicted lunar eclipses centuries before they happened. Their astronomical records, written in clay, were so accurate that modern scientists still reference them. They weren't just stargazers, they were forecasters. And they were right, often enough that kings paid them with their lives if they got it wrong. That's not superstition, that's pressure. Maya. The Maya built calendars that made ours look like a rough draft. They tracked multiple cycles simultaneously: the solar year, the sacred 260-day ritual calendar, the long count, measuring time in units of millions of days. They predicted solar eclipses, Venus cycles, the exact date the morning star would appear on the horizon, all without telescopes, all without computers, just obsessive observation across hundreds of years. Here's what people get wrong about the Maya calendar ending in 2012. It wasn't a prediction of apocalypse. It was the end of a cycle, like your odometer hitting zero and rolling back to the start. The Maya didn't fear the end of the calendar. They planned for what came after. They understood something most people still don't. Time isn't a line, it's a wheel. And if you watch it long enough, you can see where it's going. Egypt. The Nile floods every year. For ancient Egyptians, this wasn't a disaster. It was a calendar. They tracked the annual rising of a star called Sirius. When Sirius appeared on the horizon just before dawn, the flood was coming. Within days, this single observation let them predict, plan, and survive. They built entire agricultural systems around it. They knew when to plant, when to harvest, when to move. But it went deeper than farming. Egyptian priests recorded patterns in disease, famine, and political unrest. They noticed cycles: drought followed by war, flood followed by abundance. They used these to advise pharaohs on when to wage war and when to hold back. They weren't predicting the future through magic, they were predicting it through memory. The longer you remember, the further forward you can see. China. The Chinese imperial court employed official astronomers whose entire job was prediction. Eclipses, comets, unusual star movements, all of these were signs. Not just of cosmic events, but of political ones. A comet meant the ruler would fall. An eclipse meant the emperor had lost the mandate of heaven. This sounds like superstition, but here's the thing. It worked as a system of accountability. If the stars predicted disaster and the emperor ignored the warning, he was blamed when disaster came. The astronomers created a framework where leaders had to justify their decisions against observable data. The Chinese also developed early seismoscopes, devices that detected earthquakes before the shaking was felt in the capital. In 132 AD, Zhang Heng built a bronze vessel that could identify which direction an earthquake came from, hundreds of kilometers away. They weren't predicting earthquakes with mysticism. They were doing early data collection. Greece. The oracle at Delphi was the most powerful voice in the ancient world. Kings traveled for weeks to ask her questions. Generals delayed wars waiting for her answer. Entire civilizations made decisions based on what one woman said while breathing volcanic fumes in a cave. We assume this was theater, ritual without result. But historians have noted something strange. Delphi sat at the intersection of two geological fault lines. Those faults released ethylene gas, light hydrocarbon vapors that produce a mild trance and altered perception. The oracle wasn't faking. She was experiencing a chemically induced altered state, and the priests around her were expert interpreters. They listened to patterns. They gathered intelligence from every visitor. Every king who asked a question also revealed information about his kingdom, his army, his fears. Delphi was the ancient world's intelligence agency disguised as a religious site. Their predictions were often right because they were built on information, not inspiration. Indus Valley, the civilization that existed in modern-day Pakistan and India over 4,000 years ago, built something that still puzzles archaeologists. Their cities were perfectly planned, grid streets, standardized brick sizes across thousands of kilometers, advanced sewage systems. But the strange part is what they didn't leave behind. No weapons in large quantities, no images of war, no giant statues of rulers. What they did leave were measurement tools. Precise, standardized weights and rulers, consistent across the entire civilization. They had predicted something their neighbors hadn't. That civilization requires standardization. That trade requires trust. That a society that agrees on weights and measures can grow without constant conflict. They built a system to prevent the future they feared. Mesopotamia. The world's first written predictions weren't about stars. They were about livers. Babylonian priests examined the livers of sacrificed animals and read them like maps. The shape of the liver, its color, its lobes, all of it translated into predictions about battles, harvests, and the fate of kings. They kept clay tablets recording thousands of liver readings and their outcomes. This sounds absurd until you understand what they were actually doing. They were building a database. If a specific liver pattern was recorded before a military defeat, and that pattern appeared again, the priests predicted another defeat. It was pattern recognition disguised as divination. They were doing something that looks, in a certain light, almost exactly like machine learning. Input, output, prediction. Wrong method, right instinct. Antikythera. In 1901, divers off the coast of Greece pulled a corroded lump of bronze from a 2,000-year-old shipwreck. It took decades to understand what it was. An astronomical calculator, built around 100 BC, containing at least 30 interlocking bronze gears, capable of predicting the positions of the sun and moon, upcoming eclipses, and the 4-year cycle of the Olympic Games. It was the world's first analog computer. Nothing this mechanically complex appeared again for over 1,000 years. We don't know who built it. We don't know how many existed. We just know that someone, 2,000 years ago, understood that the future could be calculated, not felt, not dreamed, calculated. Here's what every one of these civilizations understood that we've quietly forgotten. The future isn't random. It moves in patterns, cycles, repetitions, the same droughts, the same political collapses, the same human behaviors playing out across centuries. They didn't have satellites. They didn't have algorithms. They had time, and they paid attention. The Babylonians watched the sky for generations. The Egyptians tracked the Nile for millennia. The Chinese recorded every tremor, every eclipse, every strange comet. They built their predictions on one thing, memory. And the longer their memory, the further forward they could see. We have more data now than any civilization in history. We have more computing power, more sensors, more records, but we have a shorter attention span than any civilization that ever lived. The ancient world didn't predict the future through magic. They predicted it by refusing to forget.